Elias Rowe walked through the grand corridors of the interstellar summit, his boots echoing softly on the polished metallic floors. Humans were still new here, and every step he took felt heavy with scrutiny. He could feel eyes on him, not just the curious gazes of alien delegates, but something heavier, sharper, like measuring sticks of judgment. Humanity had arrived late to galactic diplomacy, but their reputation for boldness and unpredictability preceded them. That reputation, for better or worse, had landed Elias in a role that made him both proud and uneasy, cultural liaison to the most feared species in the galaxy. The summit hall was massive, towering glass walls allowing a view of the spinning planets outside the station. Delegates from hundreds of civilizations filled the seats, their appearances varied beyond human imagination. Some floated without support, their translucent bodies refracting light like living prisms. Others were armored in natural shells, their multiple limbs folding and unfolding in rhythmic patterns. But one figure drew Elias' full attention, a presence that made the air feel heavier, even though she stood still and silent. Lurath. She was unlike any species Elias had seen. Her skin shimmered in shifting patterns of gold and violet, her eyes dark and endless as black holes. No human or alien had ever touched her and lived. The legend said she could end a life with a single touch. Entire civilizations had fallen, wiped out, or scattered because someone had misjudged her, or failed to obey the simple rule whispered across the galaxy: touch me again and you die. Elias kept his distance. Every muscle in his body wanted to study her more closely, but training and common sense held him back. The summit had been tense since the morning, but whispers were spreading now, uneasy murmurs echoing across the chamber. A faction of the council had accused the human delegation of bringing a new threat. Some feared humans were reckless, others believed they carried something dangerous hidden within them. Elias, for all his carefulness, couldn't help the tight knot forming in his stomach. He moved closer to the observation balcony, where other humans had gathered in a mix of curiosity and terror. Ambassador Corin, the head of the human delegation, was giving Elias a quiet nod, a silent signal to stay calm. But calmness was hard when the center of attention could kill anyone at will. Elias' hands itched. He wanted to study her to understand what made her lethal, but rules were rules. Humans had survived in the galaxy not because of strength, but because they obeyed, or cleverly bent, the rules. The first incident happened without warning. A sudden tremor rippled through the hall as an energy pulse, invisible to the naked eye, surged through the chamber. Delegates shrieked or froze, caught off guard by a biological resonance weapon designed to target Lurath's unique physiology. Elias' heart leapt. He understood immediately. The pulse would trigger a chain reaction in her body, releasing a lethal wave. If it reached her fully, the blast would kill her. But the secondary effect could ripple through the room, lethal to anyone near her. Panic erupted. Aliens screamed and scrambled, but Lurath remained still, her gaze fixed on something beyond the walls, almost serene. Elias' instincts overrode caution. He realized the only way to stop the weapon from activating was immediate physical contact. His mind screamed warnings: do not touch her, do not touch her, you will die, yet his body moved on its own. Elias leaped forward and grabbed her arm. The world slowed, the tremor of the weapon vibrating through his fingers. Then, nothing. Lurath did not scream. The pulse dissipated as though it had met a barrier it could not penetrate. Elias felt an intense wave of information rushing into him, a flood of sensation and understanding unlike anything human biology had prepared for. He staggered, almost losing his balance, but Lurath's gaze never left him. She did not lash out. She did not die. She did not let him die. The room froze. Every delegate, human and alien alike, stared. Whispers rose, then fell to stunned silence. Elias lowered his hands slowly, afraid to breathe too loud, afraid to test reality. Nothing happened. He survived the touch. The summit erupted into chaos again, but now with a new dimension of fear. Humans were anomalies. No one understood why Elias had survived where countless others would have perished instantly. Aliens whispered about it in frightened tones. The council demanded explanations. Lurath herself did not speak, but the subtle movements of her body suggested curiosity, or perhaps something more profound. Elias was escorted away for debriefing. He could barely focus on anything beyond the pulse still echoing through his body. Information from Lurath had imprinted on him like a language he had not learned consciously. He understood fragments of her biology, glimpses of her mind, flashes of the deadly resonance within her species that could be triggered by touch. Humans, it seemed, were immune, or at least capable of surviving what should have been fatal. In his confinement, Elias had time to think. The galaxy had many rules, but the oldest and strongest had always been survival. Humanity had obeyed, adapted, and now, perhaps, they had discovered something new. An ability that could rewrite those rules entirely, but with discovery came danger. Outside, the summit hall was a storm of speculation and accusations. Delegates demanded that Lureth be restrained, that Elias be examined, that humans be studied and contained. A coalition of alien factions had already begun to plot. They could not allow an anomaly to exist unchecked. Fear and power had always driven interstellar politics, and Elias had just become the center of both. He did not feel afraid, not in the usual sense. Fear had a shape, a warning, a limit. This was different. This was the sensation of standing on the edge of something impossible, something no human had faced before. He had touched death and survived. He had touched the untouchable and lived. And somehow he knew the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. Hours later, he was allowed a brief audience with Lureth under guarded observation. She remained calm, her eyes endless, her voice never more than a vibration in his mind. "You touched me. Twice now. You are not like the others." The sensation of her words bypassed sound. It was as if she had reached into his consciousness. Elias realized then that this was more than survival. Humans were not just resilient. They were unique, able to interact with a species designed for absolute isolation in ways the galaxy had never imagined. He tried to speak, to find words that would not betray fear, that would not sound ignorant, but she anticipated his questions. "Do not fear me. You are a bridge, that is all." Elias could barely process the statement, but he nodded. Somehow he understood. Humans had entered a galaxy ruled by strict boundaries and lethal taboos. The rule about touching Lureth was absolute. Yet here he was, alive, standing in defiance of that absolute rule. And in that defiance, he realized, lay the potential for something greater, something that could change the balance of power across the stars. For the first time, Elias felt the thrill of discovery mixed with dread. His actions had rewritten expectations. The galaxy would now watch humanity with suspicion, with fear, and with hope. Every alien faction with ambitions or grudges would reassess their approach to humans. Some would see threat, others would see opportunity. But all would understand one unshakable truth. Humans were dangerous, not because of technology, not because of numbers, but because of their sheer unpredictability. That night, in his private quarters aboard the summit station, Elias stared out at the stars. The cosmos had always seemed vast, indifferent, full of civilizations that rose and fell without warning. And now, he thought, humanity had inserted itself into that stream, not as prey, not as a minor player, but as a force that could survive where none had dared. He closed his eyes, feeling the lingering echo of Lureth's touch, the strange resonance that remained within him. It was a reminder and a warning. Survival had been immediate, but the implications were far-reaching. Every decision, every interaction from this moment forward would carry weight. Humanity's first step into the wider galaxy had been audacious, almost reckless, and yet it had worked. And somewhere beyond the observation windows, Lureth watched, her expression unreadable. She had survived countless challenges in her long life, yet Elias' touch had sparked something new, something unprecedented. A bridge, she had said. That bridge could unite, disrupt, or destroy. Elias did not know which path humanity would take, but one thing was certain: the galaxy would remember this day. The day a human touched the untouchable and lived. And in the shadows of the summit, in the halls where whispers became plans, and plans became plots, the first seeds of both fear and respect for humanity began to take root. Elias had not just survived, he had changed the rules. And the consequences of that change would ripple farther than any human could imagine. The corridors of the summit station felt colder now, though the temperature had not changed. Elias Rowe walked slowly, each step echoing off the metal walls, his mind replaying the impossible events of the previous day. He had survived the touch of Lureth, the untouchable, the living weapon of her species. Yet survival was only the beginning. The moment he had made contact, the galaxy had shifted. Every alien delegate in the summit hall now regarded humans differently, some with fear, some with fascination, and others with silent calculations that promised danger in the coming days. Elias had been confined after the summit, not as a prisoner exactly, but under constant observation. Scientists, diplomats, and security personnel from multiple species surrounded him, each eager to understand what had happened. They had instruments, scanners, even strange devices that probed at his nervous system, yet he felt nothing unusual except for a lingering resonance in his limbs. a subtle hum, like the echo of a song barely remembered. He knew instinctively that it came from Lurath, and it was not entirely biological. It was something else, something far more profound. Meanwhile, Lurath herself had been taken to a secure chamber. She remained calm, standing in the center of a sphere of energy barriers designed to contain her lethal touch. No one dared approach her, yet every observer knew that their safety was only temporary. The Summit Council had begun whispering behind closed doors, debating the implications of Elia's survival. If humans could withstand what her species had designed to be fatal, the balance of power across the galaxy was suddenly uncertain. Elias sat in his temporary quarters, a small room with no view and only the hum of the station to keep him company. His mind raced with questions. How was it possible that he had survived? What did it mean for humanity? And more urgently, how would the galaxy react to a species that could touch death and live? The first contact with the Council came through a translator drone. A tall, insect-like alien with multiple limbs folded across its chest hovered in the corner. Its voice was a series of clicks and hums translated into words that felt mechanical and cold. "Human Elias Rowe," it began. "Your survival is unprecedented. We request full cooperation in determining the mechanism behind your anomaly. Resistance is ill-advised." "I will cooperate as much as I can," he said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. Inwardly, he wondered if they understood that some things could not be explained with devices or measurements. Lurath's touch had been more than physical. It had been connection. The drone's multifaceted eyes turned toward him, analyzing, calculating. "Explain the sequence of physical contact." "No human physiology should withstand direct contact. Your species possesses unknown adaptive qualities. You are classified as high-risk anomaly." Hours later, he was summoned again, this time for a formal audience with Lurath. The guards opened the energy field to allow him entry, and Elias felt the familiar weight of her gaze immediately. She had not moved since yesterday, yet he felt her presence like a gravitational pull. "You touched me," she said, her words resonating directly in his mind as before. "Twice. I had no choice. You were in danger. You must understand what your existence means. Humans are bridges. You can interact with my species in ways others cannot. That is why you lived. The galaxy has never seen such a trait." And he had no idea how to explain that he had survived because he had simply acted, instinctively, not because of some measurable property. The Summit's council convened again that evening, though Elias was not present. The whispers reached him through the walls, through the faint vibrations of the station. Humans had been a minor curiosity before, now they were a topic of intense debate. Some factions suggested that humans be restricted, kept under observation, or even eliminated before their influence spread further. Others saw opportunity. The possibility of harnessing human adaptability could change the balance of power forever. Elias realized then that he was no longer just a cultural liaison. He was a symbol, a pivot point on which the future of interstellar politics could turn. The weight of that knowledge pressed on him like gravity, and yet, despite the danger, a spark of something else ignited within him, possibility. Humans had survived where no one expected. If they could survive Lurath's touch, they could survive almost anything. The following days were tense. Delegates avoided direct confrontation with Elias, yet he could sense their calculations. Every alien in the station was trying to measure him, understand him, and anticipate his actions. Scientists attached devices to his body that emitted gentle pulses, trying to analyze the lingering resonance of Lurath's touch. Every experiment failed. Instruments picked up nothing conclusive. Humans were simply unquantifiable. One evening, while Elias sat alone in his quarters, the door slid open and a young human researcher stepped in. She had been assigned to monitor him, though she carried herself with caution, as if afraid he might vanish, break, or explode at any moment. "Elias," she said quietly, "you need to see this." On the screen, the summit hall was displayed. Lurath had been released temporarily under supervision, moving among delegates, her energy barriers active but unobtrusive. And yet wherever she went, conversations dropped, whispers grew, and tension thickened like a storm cloud. "Everyone is afraid of her," the researcher said. "But now, with you, the fear is different. It's not just about her. It's about humans. You survived. You changed the rules." Elias dreamed of Lurath not as a deadly being, but as a conduit of energy, a living system that pulsed with life and information. Her presence was neither friendly nor hostile. It was simply complete. In the dream, he reached out, and for the first time, he understood the connection she had described. To touch her was not to dominate or harm. It was to share a moment of mutual comprehension, to bridge the gap between species. He awoke with a start, sweat on his brow, and the lingering hum still resonating faintly in his body. He understood that this was more than survival. Humanity's role in the galaxy had shifted overnight. No longer could humans be underestimated. No longer could alien factions assume that humans were fragile, reckless, or irrelevant. In the following days, the summit became a chessboard. Factions formed and dissolved around whispers of human potential. Some sought alliances with Elias and his delegation, offering technology, treaties, and resources in exchange for access to the human anomaly. Others plotted quietly to contain or eliminate the threat before it grew. Elias attended meetings, observed, and learned quickly. He realized that survival in this galaxy depended on understanding not just technology or diplomacy, but psychology, biology, and perception. Humans had a unique advantage: adaptability. Where other species relied on rules, instincts, or rigidity, humans could improvise. They could survive where others would fail. And now more than ever, that adaptability was needed. One afternoon, the energy barriers surrounding Lureth's chamber flickered. Security rushed to adjust them, and Elias sensed tension in the air. Something had changed. Lureth herself seemed aware, her gaze directed not at the barriers but at him. A subtle pull, a challenge, a silent question passed between them. Elias knew instinctively that the next step would define not only his survival, but humanity's place in the wider galaxy. He had survived the first touch. The galaxy had begun to take notice, but survival alone would not be enough. Adaptation, understanding, and courage would be required. And deep down, Elias understood that he was only the beginning. Humanity's potential had been revealed, but its consequences had yet to unfold. The next move, he realized, would not come from the humans, nor from Lureth, nor from the Council. It would come from the galaxy itself. And when it did, humanity would have to be ready to act, to endure, and to redefine what it meant to survive. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the faint resonance of Lureth within him. He had touched the untouchable and lived. Now he had to navigate the storm he had set in motion. And somewhere in the silence of the summit, he felt the first flicker of what would become a reckoning. Elias Rowe had spent days thinking about Lureth, about the impossible survival of the first touch, and about the galaxy watching him. Now, as he walked through the corridors of the summit station, he realized that survival alone was no longer enough. His existence had sparked whispers and fear that stretched across multiple star systems. Humans were no longer just observers. They were a potential threat, a question mark in the carefully balanced web of interstellar politics. The Council had called an emergency session. Elias entered the chamber, escorted by armed security drones from multiple species. Lureth was already there, standing in the center, her form glowing softly beneath the protective energy field that had been erected to contain her lethal abilities. The delegates were tense, shifting in their seats, speaking in low, urgent tones. Every eye in the room seemed to linger on Elias as though he alone could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. Human Elias Rowe, the lead counselor began, a being with translucent wings and eyes that shimmered like liquid metal. Your actions have created uncertainty and fear. Explain how you survived contact with Lureth. The galaxy demands clarity. I reacted to save her from a weapon. That's all I know. If humans are immune, the consequences are unimaginable. You, however, do not trigger that response. You neutralize it, you are a bridge. The Council demanded a demonstration. Security barriers were lowered, though guards remained vigilant. Lureth's form shimmered under the energy field, and Elias could feel the subtle hum of her presence through the floor beneath him. His mind raced, trying to anticipate what was expected of him. He had survived once almost by instinct. Could he survive again intentionally? And if he did, what would it mean? Lureth's gaze met his. There was no threat, no command, only observation. She understood that the next action was his choice, and in that choice lay the power to define not only his fate but humanity's place in the galaxy. Elias stepped forward slowly. Each movement was deliberate, measured. He reached out, hand trembling slightly, and made contact. The second touch was different from the first. This time it was intentional, controlled. He could feel the lethal energy that had once threatened to end him, but instead of pain, he felt resonance, a flow of information, of understanding, passing between them. The Council gasped. Cameras, sensors, and instruments struggled to record what was happening. For the first time, the galaxy witnessed a human not merely surviving contact, but interacting with a species designed for death. Lureth did not react with aggression. Her body did not reject him. The lethal systems within her simply shut down, neutralized by the compatibility that humans possessed. When the touch ended, Elias stepped back, breathing hard. He had not died. Lureth remained calm, her energy field dimming slightly as if acknowledging the connection. The room was silent, the weight of what had just occurred pressing on every delegate. Humans were not just resilient, they were capable of altering biological and systemic rules that had been absolute for millennia. The council debated furiously after the demonstration. Some members demanded that humans be restricted immediately, fearing the implications of such compatibility. Others argued that this was an opportunity, a chance to forge alliances that could stabilize or dominate entire regions of space. Every faction understood one thing clearly: humans were no longer predictable. They could no longer be controlled by the old rules. Elias was escorted to a private chamber, still under observation, but without the intense scrutiny of the council. Lureth appeared briefly, moving with grace and purpose. She spoke not through words, but through the resonance that humans could perceive in a unique way. You have changed the balance. The galaxy will react. They will fear you, they will seek you, and some will try to destroy you. Elias absorbed the warning. It was not fear that coursed through him, but a sense of responsibility. He had survived by instinct before. Now he had acted intentionally. The consequences were not just for him, they were for all of humanity. In the following days, reports reached him of subtle shifts in behavior across the summit. Delegates whispered, alliances were reconsidered, and previously neutral factions began forming coalitions, either in support of or against humanity. The ripple effect was immediate. Humans were no longer minor players, they were a variable that could not be ignored. Scientists continued their study, but every attempt to quantify Elias' adaptability failed. Instruments detected nothing unusual in his biology, yet the results were undeniable. He could neutralize lethal systems, survive attacks that should have ended him instantly, and interact with species in ways previously impossible. Humanity was, in essence, rewriting the rules of survival in the galaxy. One evening, as Elias walked through the observation deck overlooking the spinning planets outside the station, he felt a new awareness settling over him. He understood that survival and adaptability were only part of the story. Humans had potential for something greater, not just to endure, but to influence, to connect, and to change the course of interstellar relations. Lureth appeared beside him, her form luminous against the backdrop of distant stars. "You understand now," she said, her voice resonating softly in his mind. "Your survival is not merely personal, it is symbolic. Humanity has potential beyond what your species realizes, but potential attracts attention, and attention can be dangerous." Elias nodded. He understood the truth in her words. The galaxy would watch humanity closely. Some would offer friendship, others would seek to exploit or destroy them. Survival alone would no longer be enough. Humans would need strategy, foresight, and courage to navigate the challenges ahead. The next morning, an emergency alert flashed across the station's communication network. A coalition of alien factions had issued a formal statement, demanding immediate restrictions on human movement and interaction. They cited Elias' survival as evidence that humans were a threat to galactic stability. The council was divided, but the factions outside the summit were unified in their fear. Elias understood that the time for passive observation was over. Humans had been noticed, and now they would be tested. Every decision, every action, every interaction with other species would carry consequences far beyond the immediate moment. He spent hours preparing, reviewing the data from previous interactions, and consulting with other human delegates. They began to formulate a plan, not of aggression, but of demonstration. Humanity needed to show that their survival and adaptability were not a threat, but an asset. They needed to reveal that humans could be trusted, that they could cooperate, and that they could survive where others failed. When Elias finally returned to Lureth's chamber, he felt a deep connection that went beyond simple survival. "We are not enemies," she conveyed. "We are aligned in understanding. Together, we can influence what comes next." He realized that the second touch had not only neutralized her lethal systems, it had forged a bond, a bridge that could alter relationships across the galaxy. Humans and Lureth species were now connected in a way that defied millennia of rules, taboos, and fears. The implications were staggering. As the summit convened again, Elias stepped forward not as a mere human delegate, but as a representative of a species that had demonstrated something extraordinary. He addressed the council, speaking plainly and with clarity. "We did not come here to dominate. We came to survive, but survival is not enough. Humanity has the capacity to connect, to understand, and to endure where others cannot. We offer cooperation, not conflict. We ask only to be recognized for what we can contribute." Elias stepped back, feeling the weight of what had just occurred. The second touch had done more than ensure survival. It had opened the door to possibilities no one had imagined. Humans were no longer predictable. They were adaptable, influential, and capable of bridging gaps between species and systems that had once seemed insurmountable. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the station, Lureth observed him, her gaze both approving and thoughtful. She had seen countless interactions in her long life, but none like this. A human had not only survived contact with her, they had engaged, intentionally and successfully, and in doing so had begun to rewrite the balance of power in the galaxy. Elias understood the truth of her presence. The galaxy would test humanity, but humans now possessed a unique advantage. They were adaptable, unpredictable, and capable of surviving where others could not. The second touch was more than survival, it was a declaration. Humanity had arrived, and the stars would never be the same. The consequences of that touch were only beginning to unfold, and Elias felt a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The galaxy would challenge them. Aliens would plot, fear, and seek advantage. But humans had shown, in the simplest and most profound way possible, that they could endure the impossible. Elias turned back toward the observation deck, watching the planets spin silently in the void. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, dangerous, and unpredictable. But for the first time, he felt a sense of clarity. Humanity's place in the galaxy was not just as survivors. They were connectors, changers, and pioneers. And whatever challenges lay ahead, they had the power to meet them, head-on without fear. The galaxy had noticed humanity. That was the simplest way to describe it, though the consequences were anything but simple. Across star systems, across council chambers and trading hubs, whispers carried the same message. Humans were unpredictable, dangerous, and capable of surviving what should have killed them. Elias Rowe had become a symbol of that change, though he felt uneasy with the attention. Survival had been one thing, but now humanity's reputation was spreading, and not all of it was friendly. The summit station, once a place of cautious diplomacy, had transformed into a hub of tension and speculation. Delegates watched Elias constantly, their eyes calculating. Aliens with natural aggression flinched when humans approached. Others observed him with fascination, trying to measure the extent of his adaptability. Every interaction he had was noted, analyzed, and debated, often long after he had left the room. For the humans aboard the station, the situation was both thrilling and frightening. News of Elias' survival had reached human colonies, emboldening some and worrying others. They had long relied on human ingenuity and adaptability to thrive on harsh planets and survive interstellar travel. But now the galaxy at large was witnessing the same traits in action. Humanity had become a wild card, capable of shifting alliances, upsetting power structures, and forcing the most rigid species to reconsider their assumptions. Lureth moved through the station with grace, aware of every gaze that followed her. Elias had learned to sense her presence even before he saw her. It was a subtle vibration in the air, a quiet resonance that made his skin tingle. She had become both an ally and a teacher, guiding him through the nuances of her species and the implications of what had occurred. She did not speak openly to the council often, but her influence was undeniable. Where humans were once weak in the eyes of the galaxy, she now positioned them as capable of change, of survival, of partnership. One morning, Elias was summoned to a council briefing. The room was tense. Representatives from multiple factions leaned forward, their expressions sharp. Some were visibly annoyed, others curious, and a few wore expressions that suggested fear beneath their polite demeanor. "Human Elias Rowe," the counselor began, her voice formal but tinged with urgency. "Your species' abilities have caused concern. Multiple factions are requesting restricted interactions with humans until your capabilities are fully understood. We require your cooperation to prevent instability. Your survival was exceptional. If humans are capable of neutralizing lethal biological systems, your species could disrupt balance across multiple systems. This is not a trivial matter." Humanity had always relied on ingenuity, on improvisation, and on the ability to adapt in unexpected situations. Now, those traits were under scrutiny across thousands of systems. Every decision he made could have consequences far beyond his immediate surroundings. Humans had survived contact with Lureth. They had neutralized what should have been fatal. And now the galaxy was testing the limits of what they could do next. Meanwhile, Lureth approached him quietly, her presence resonating in ways he could feel more than hear. "The galaxy will react," she said, her tone calm yet warning. "Some will fear. Some will seek to control. Some will try to use you. You must be careful. You are now a symbol, and symbols can be dangerous." Elias understood the gravity of her words. They were not threats, they were truth. Humanity's presence in the galaxy had shifted overnight, from curiosity to threat, from minor player to unpredictable force. And humans had to navigate this carefully. Survival was no longer enough. They needed strategy, foresight, and courage. Over the following days, humanity's influence began to spread. Delegates from previously neutral systems approached Elias and his team, offering treaties and alliances. They sought to learn from humans, to partner with them, and in some cases, to recruit them for missions that required adaptability and resilience. At the same time, other factions plotted. Fear had a way of motivating actions that were neither rational nor safe. Some groups sought to restrict human movement entirely, arguing that Elias' abilities were a threat that could not be ignored. Others tried to manipulate the council, using political maneuvering to isolate humans and Lureth, to gain leverage over a species they did not understand. In the midst of this, Elias trained with Lureth. She guided him through exercises that tested his ability to interact with systems and beings that were otherwise lethal. Each session was a challenge, not of brute force, but of synchronization, awareness, and instinct. He learned to sense subtle shifts in energy, to anticipate reactions in ways that were impossible to teach through books or simulations. Humans had always thrived by improvisation, but now Elias was learning to refine instinct into skill. One day, during a particularly intense session, a group of council delegates observed from a distance. Elias touched Lureth's arm again, deliberately, and the effect was immediate and undeniable. Her lethal defenses did not trigger. Instead, the two of them shared a brief resonance, subtle but powerful. The delegates gasped, their instruments struggling to record the interaction. What they witnessed could not be explained by biology or physics alone. Humans were not merely surviving, they were interacting, changing the behavior of a species designed to kill. Word of this demonstration spread quickly through the summit. The rumors became discussion topics. Some factions argued that humans should be controlled. Others, recognizing the potential, argued that they should be cultivated as partners. Humanity's reputation shifted from mere curiosity to potential ally, potential threat, and symbol of unpredictability all at once. In his quarters that night, Elias reflected on the situation. Survival had been instinct. The second touch had been intentional, strategic, and it had demonstrated humanity's potential in a way the galaxy could not ignore. Humans were adaptable, yes, but they were more than that. They could influence, connect, and even neutralize systems that had been designed to kill. The implications were staggering. The next morning, the council summoned him again. This time, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Delegates spoke in hushed tones, eyes darting toward Elias whenever he moved. The counselor addressed him directly. "Human, the galaxy requires assurances. Your species cannot act without oversight. We need to understand the full extent of your capabilities. We are adaptable, yes, but we do not seek to dominate or destroy. We survive, we cooperate, and we connect. That is what makes humans different. That is our advantage and our responsibility." For the first time, they seemed to recognize that humans were not just a species. They were a new kind of variable, one that could not be ignored, controlled, or dismissed. Lureth observed from a distance, her presence a steadying influence. She had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. She had witnessed beings who claimed power only to fail when confronted with the unexpected. Humans, she realized, were different. They could endure, adapt, and respond in ways that other species could not. And that made them not just survivors, but potential catalysts for change across the galaxy. In the days that followed, Elias and the human delegation worked to build alliances, not through force, but through demonstration. They showed that humans could survive, yes, but also that they could cooperate, contribute, and adapt to situations that others found impossible. Slowly, the tide of opinion shifted. Some factions remained wary, but others began to see humans as indispensable partners, capable of bridging gaps between species, systems, and civilizations. The ripple effect was undeniable. Across multiple star systems, leaders reconsidered their strategies, alliances were formed, and the very structure of interstellar politics began to adjust to the presence of humanity. Humans were no longer minor players. They were a force that could not be ignored, a species that had survived the impossible and demonstrated that survival was only the beginning. As Elias watched the stars spin outside the observation deck, he felt the weight of responsibility settle over him. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy not merely to survive, but to influence, connect, and endure where others had failed. The second touch had done more than neutralize Lureth's lethal defenses. It had sent a message across the stars. Humans were here and they were capable of changing the rules. Somewhere in the quiet hum of the station, Elias sensed Lureth's presence. "The galaxy is watching," she said softly, "and now humanity must act with wisdom, courage, and purpose." Elias nodded, understanding the truth in her words. Humanity's survival had brought attention. Their adaptability had sparked both fear and respect. And the next moves, by humans, by aliens, by the galaxy itself, would define the course of history for centuries to come. The consequences of the first and second touches were unfolding rapidly. Humanity's reputation had risen, but it was fragile. Every interaction, every decision, every alliance carried weight. The galaxy had begun to take humans seriously, and that recognition was both opportunity and challenge. Elias knew one thing with certainty: the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. And that realization filled him with a mixture of pride, fear, and determination. Humans had survived, adapted, and connected. Now they would have to navigate a universe that was watching, waiting, and reacting to their every move. And somewhere in the depths of the station, in the quiet spaces where decisions were made and whispers became plans, the seeds of both opportunity and conflict were taking root. Humanity had become a force, not by strength alone, but by ingenuity, adaptability, and the ability to endure what others could not. The stars outside spun silently, indifferent to the struggles of any one species, yet within that vast expanse, humans had begun to carve a place for themselves. A place that was uncertain, dangerous, and full of potential. A place that they had earned through courage, instinct, and the simple but profound act of surviving the impossible. The galaxy was no longer the same. Humanity had arrived, not quietly, not as observers, but as a force that others could neither ignore nor control. Elias Rowe felt the weight of that reality every time he walked through the corridors of the summit station. The whispers had grown louder, the stares sharper, and the tension thicker. Every alien delegate knew that humans had survived the impossible. Every faction understood that their actions, their decisions, and even their existence could shift the balance of power. Elias had learned to live with that attention. It was a strange kind of pressure, one that sharpened his mind and honed his instincts. He had survived Lureth's lethal touch twice, and the resonance of those interactions still pulsed faintly through his body. But survival was no longer enough. Humanity needed to act, to demonstrate that their adaptability was not a threat, but a tool, a bridge to cooperation, and a force for change. The Council had convened again, this time under unprecedented urgency. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the massive chamber, their bodies reflecting fear, curiosity, and ambition in equal measure. Elias entered with the human delegation, accompanied by Lureth, whose presence alone demanded attention. Even among the most cautious delegates, there was an unspoken acknowledgement. The humans and Lureth together were a variable that could not be ignored. "Human Elias Rowe," the lead counselor began, her voice echoing in the chamber, "your species has demonstrated unusual capabilities. Some factions fear your potential, others see opportunity. The galaxy requires assurance that humans will act responsibly. But we will not be ignored or underestimated." Before the council could respond, an alert flashed across the communication network. A faction from the outer systems had attempted to infiltrate the station. Their goal was clear: to capture, contain, or eliminate the human anomaly before it could influence the galaxy further. Security drones moved instantly, intercepting the intruders before they reached the core of the station. Elias felt a familiar thrill, the instinctive rush that had saved him during the first touch. He glanced at Lureth. She nodded once, a gesture of understanding. Together they moved toward the observation deck, coordinating with security to assess the threat. When they arrived, the intruders had been subdued, but their presence was a clear message. fear of humanity could turn violent. Aliens would attempt to control or destroy them if they perceived humans as a threat. Humanity's reputation, already growing, had painted a target on their backs. Elias spoke to the gathered security teams. "We survive not by hiding, but by understanding and acting. Observe, anticipate, and adapt. That is our strength." The teams nodded, inspired by the clarity and decisiveness in his voice. Humanity had always relied on instinct and adaptability, and now those traits were being tested on a galactic scale. In the days that followed, humans and Lurath worked to stabilize relations. They met with factions that were curious, cautious, and even hostile. Through demonstrations, cooperation, and careful negotiation, they began to show the galaxy that human adaptability was not a weapon of destruction, but a bridge to understanding. Elias participated in every interaction, learning to read subtle cues, anticipate reactions, and make decisions that balanced diplomacy and strategy. He had survived lethal touch. He had neutralized what was designed to kill. Now he was learning to survive politics, intrigue, and fear, where the stakes were as high as life itself. Then an urgent alert arrived. A coalition of alien factions had activated a dormant system on a nearby station. It was a defensive structure designed to kill intruders with lethal energy pulses. Historically, no organic life could survive such a system, yet the coalition had mobilized it in an attempt to send a message to humanity. Survive this and prove your worth or perish. Elias knew what had to be done. He studied the system remotely, analyzing its mechanisms and vulnerabilities. Lurath stood beside him, her presence calm but powerful, resonating with the energy of the station. "You must engage it directly," she said, her voice soft in his mind. "No one else can survive its activation. Only you can bridge this system and neutralize it." Now they would do it again, not by instinct alone, but by choice, by courage, and by understanding. Elias approached the system, sensors flaring and alarms sounding around him. The energy pulses began, sharp and deadly, designed to react instantly to organic presence. He moved forward, each step precise, calculating. Then he reached out and touched the central core. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The lethal pulses attempted to surge through him, but his body, tuned by experience and adaptation, synchronized with the system. Instead of being destroyed, he became a conduit, neutralizing the energy in real time. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the coalition's operators watched in disbelief as the system stabilized without harm to him. When Elias withdrew, the chamber fell silent. Every observer, human and alien alike, understood what had occurred. Humans had survived not just contact with a lethal species, but contact with a system designed to annihilate them. Humanity had proven decisively that they could endure, adapt, and influence systems in ways no other species could. The council convened immediately. Delegates spoke in cautious tones, some awed, others fearful, but all recognizing the shift in power. Humanity was no longer merely present. They were influential, capable of changing the course of events across the galaxy. Elias addressed the council. "We survive, we adapt, we connect, but we do not seek unnecessary conflict. Humanity's strength lies not in destruction, but in understanding. We offer cooperation, not domination, and we will continue to act responsibly, guided by logic and insight." "The galaxy will test you," she said to Elias, "but humans are no longer merely survivors. You are connectors, changers, and catalysts. The stars themselves will take note." Elias felt the resonance within him, the faint echo of the touches that had begun this journey. He understood that this was only the beginning. Humans had survived the impossible, had demonstrated adaptability, and had shown the galaxy that survival alone was not enough. They could influence, connect, and endure. Across the stars, messages spread of the human who had touched death and lived, who had neutralized the untouchable, and who had stabilized a lethal system with nothing but courage, insight, and instinct. Humans were no longer seen as fragile newcomers. They were respected, feared, and acknowledged as a species capable of changing the rules themselves. Elias walked to the observation deck, looking out at the swirling planets below. The galaxy was vast and indifferent, yet within its expanse, humans had carved a place for themselves. A place earned not by brute force, but by adaptability, ingenuity, and the courage to face the impossible. He felt Lurath's presence beside him once more. "You have begun something remarkable," she said, "but the galaxy will continue to challenge you. Humans must remain vigilant, wise, and brave." Elias nodded. He understood the weight of her words. The first touch had been instinct. The second had been deliberate. The third, now the actions humanity took next would define their place in the galaxy for centuries. Humans had survived, adapted, and connected. The universe had noticed, and somewhere in the silent hum of the station, Elias felt a surge of possibility. Humanity's journey had begun in survival, continued in connection, and now moved toward influence. The stars would watch, the galaxy would respond, and humans would act, not recklessly, not blindly, but with courage, ingenuity, and the adaptability that had carried them across the void. The council adjourned, leaving Elias alone with the stars. He could feel the future stretching before him, vast and uncertain, full of challenges and opportunities. Humanity had proven its place among the stars, but the journey was far from over. Yet for the first time, Elias smiled. Humans had touched the untouchable, neutralized what was designed to kill, survived the impossible, and influenced the galaxy. They were no longer minor players, observers, or fragile newcomers. They were a species capable of shaping the course of history itself. And as the stars spun silently, indifferent to the struggles of any single species, humanity stood ready to act, to endure, and to connect in ways no one had ever imagined. The message was clear, echoing across the galaxy. If a human reaches out, let them.